Thank you, Marilyn, for that beautiful offertory. Good morning. I am Reverend Michelle Scott-Huffman. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the minister here at First UU. This month of thinking about deep listening has been a good one, and sometimes it's a hard one. Deep listening is a practice that I think we all struggle with, but I won't speak for you. I'll just speak for me and say that I know I struggle with deep listening sometimes, particularly because I like to talk. So sometimes I spend more time with my mouth open than my ears open. I'm thankful for a conversation this week that has helped me to pay more attention to that. So last week, Colleen talked a little bit about the culture that we create and nurture as a church and examining our own to find the places where we can be more welcoming and inclusive. And it's no surprise to any of us, particularly those of you who have been doing civil rights related work for decades, that there is still much work to be done to eliminate racism in this country and to dismantle systems built on and held up by white supremacy. So even in the midst of this liberal community, we can find ourselves struggling to adapt to new understandings and new ways of communicating that people in marginalized communities have asked us to adopt. One of those difficulties is understanding and working to eliminate microaggressions. In a community like ours, outright racism, transphobia, or other forms of discriminatory behavior might not be common, though they do occur. However, microaggressions occur all the time. And for those on the receiving end, it's something akin to the idiom death by 1,000 cuts. It's painful and exhausting. Those who disagree with paying attention to microaggressions often argue that it's much ado about nothing. Why can't these minor slights be ignored, easily forgiven, or graciously laughed into disappearance? Simba Ronyowa wrote in the 2015 Atlantic article, Microaggressions Matter, that it is certainly worth exploring microaggressions on the basis of their link to implicit biases, which have serious material consequences beyond hurt feelings, from discriminatory hiring to racial inequities in policing and the broader US criminal justice system. In other words, microaggressions matter because they seem to be both symptoms and causes of larger structural problems. So the call to downplay microaggressions also underestimates the powerful effect of sanctioning them instead. Calling out microaggressions can serve as a deterrent. From the perspective of social justice advocates, accountability incentivizes more thoughtful communication across lines of gender, race, sexuality, and gender identity. It codifies the empathy that can help lead to a more inclusive atmosphere. So today, I want to share with you a role play video that Monica McNeal and I made to explore common microaggressions and to imagine the ways that we can make corrections and overcome these practices. I'm thankful for Monica's willingness to explore this with us. Before we start the video, let me just say this. I think it was Stephen Colbert who said in the last few weeks, if you want to see someone engage in full-on aggression, just tell them they've committed a microaggression. I hope that will not be the case for us. I hope we'll be able to see ourselves and our stumbles in these examples, and I hope we'll commit to doing better. I myself have been guilty of each of these offenses more times than I can count. And I hope, having spoken the words now with such intention, I will recognize more easily these and other microaggressions and just keep improving, because it's the right thing to do and because my friend Monica has asked it of me. So here's the video.
Hello, my name is Monica, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm glad to engage in this activity with Michelle today as we talk about microaggressions and how to recognize them. So let's get started.
Hey, Monica, I'm glad I caught you. I've been meaning to tell you that I was so impressed with your input on our topic at the Humanist meeting last week. Every time you speak, I'm so amazed at how intelligent and articulate you are. Where did you get your degree? Do you have a PhD?
Okay, what just happened is called a microaggression. So what's a microaggression? Let's pause for a brief moment and go over what a microaggression is. Merriam-Webster dictionary, microaggression is a comment or action that subtly and often unconsciously or unintentionally expresses a prejudiced attitude toward a member of a marginalized group, such as a racial minority. To hear what is really being said, we need to listen. But how does one listen more than they already do? Well, as we've been learning this month with deep listening, I found a definition online that summed it up quite nicely. Deep listening involves hearing more than just the words of the speaker. It taps into the deeper meaning, unspoken needs, and feeling conveyed. It is something that is done with the heart as well as the mind. As we continue the conversation, listen deeply and remember the definition for microaggression. See if you can hear why it applies. Let's continue with the conversation. Hey, Michelle, I want to say thank you because I know you meant it as a compliment, but it wasn't. Actually, it was offensive.
So if you know that it was meant to be a compliment, I'm trying to understand, was it wrong for me to give you a compliment?
If we look at just the words, no. The comment initially seems kind, encouraging, and considerate, as I know it was meant to be. So I understand the confusion. Was your desire to give me a compliment wrong? Of course not. That would be silly. In and of itself, telling someone they're smart isn't a problem.
Right. So I'm still a little bit confused. It's okay to compliment someone, but you still consider this to be offensive. So what was offensive about what I said?
It wasn't what you said or that you gave me a compliment. It was why it was said. To understand, I need you to step back and try to put yourself in my shoes. We all spoke tonight, and many people said many great things. However, I was the only one you said spoke well and was intelligent and asked whether or not I had a degree.
Okay. So I am trying to put myself in your shoes, in the shoes of a person of color. And I really do want to understand and want to learn. So are you saying that it was offensive simply because I said it to a person of color?
Well, Michelle, to put it bluntly, how many times after a conversation with other white people have you said, "You speak so well. You're so intelligent. Do you have a degree?" So let's pause there, and keeping in mind the definitions for microaggressions and deep listening, let's move on to the second microaggression and keep listening.
Monica, as you know, you are one of only 2 Black people who are a regular part of this community. And I think you also know that we are fundamentally against racism and that we're really committed to learning what we need to learn to get rid of it and to be better allies. And sometimes you call us out on behaviors that are based in white supremacy. So since it's obviously important to you Can we just count on you to represent the Black community and to help us understand the Black experience so we know what we need to do better?
Before I answer that, in your own words, what's a microaggression?
I think microaggressions are offhanded comments that are subconsciously or unconsciously based in assumptions and biases about the inherent less than-ness of people from minority communities. I think they're often spoken with positive, though misguided intent.
Okay, great. Keeping that in mind, I ask you to try to put yourself in my place when I say what you said was racist.
Oh, was it wrong for me to ask you to share your thoughts with the group so we could learn?
No, of course not. Having a true desire to understand the struggle Black people, people of color, go through is where it all starts.
Okay. So if it's okay for me to ask a person of color to share, what did I say that was wrong?
Sure. Again, the words in and of themselves, you asking me to share my experience was not offensive. I mean, your sole purpose was to be more understanding and to listen, right? But that's why it's called a microaggression, because when they are expressed, the person is most often unaware.
Okay. So you said yourself that my intentions were good. So why is what I said considered to be a microaggression if my intentions were good?
Unfortunately, as the saying goes, good intentions pave the road to hell. Now, the debate on whether or not someone believes in a literal hell is not the point. I use this saying because it's showing, as we know, that one's intentions do not always result in good, even though well-intentioned. Microaggression comes out of what our immediate surroundings, media, entertainment, etc., teaches us in our day-to-day lives. And as we absorb all of these things, whether we realize it or not, we are acting out these behaviors every day. Think about it. Have you ever asked another white person to get up and represent, speak for all Caucasians in the world? So let's keep going.
Hey, Monica, we're working on a new campaign to address racially based disparities in healthcare, and I am so glad you are a part of the team. I know that you must have your own personal experiences of this, and maybe you could share your story and we could put it in one of the ads that we run.
Thank you for asking me to share. I would
Have you
love.
read Dana Bowen Matthews' book, Just Medicine, A Cure for Racial Inequality in American Healthcare? It explores the idea that the unconscious biases held by healthcare providers might explain racial disparities in health.
No, I haven't, but I've had my own experiences that may help people understand that I would love to share with
I'm thinking that we could find other people to share their stories too, but I really want to lift up the research and the evidence behind it.
Oh, okay. I have a great experience. I would like
I really think that we have the opportunity with this campaign to really do some good work, and I want to get started soon. So can you just quickly tell me where you think your story might fit?
Okay, let's pause and reflect. Remembering what microaggressions are, an unintentional act of racism, here are some examples of how this is detrimental to not just Black people and people of color, but white people as well. Saying you want to help, but disregarding the experience of the very people of color you're talking about hurts the very people you say you want to help, as well as ignoring possible contributions and solutions from those people who also personally experience these injustices in their everyday lives keeps the whole from learning and growing. In this white supremacist culture, sense of urgency is an example of this. Dismantling Racism, a workbook for social change groups by Kenneth Jones and Tema Okun, Changework, 2001. 1. Continued sense of urgency makes it difficult to take time to be inclusive, encourage democratic and/or thoughtful decision-making, to think long-term, to consider consequences. This one conversation made the person of color feel excluded from the very conversation that is supposed to be about them, because the white person felt what they had to say was more urgent, thus shutting down the person of color, making them feel like their struggle was of no value to be heard. Number 2, this frequently results in sacrificing potential allies for quick or highly visible results. For example, sacrificing interests of communities of color in order to win victories for white people seen as default or norm community. The thoughts on what solutions could have been were never heard, but instead talked over, and so the group did not get to benefit from what the person of color could have proposed if given the opportunity to speak and be heard. Even people who fervently work against racism can express microaggressions. The entire world has been immersed in hate. To judge each other based on things people have no control over when they come into this world. Microaggressions are expressions of what most do not even know is inside of them, even when they hear them, which is why it requires deep listening to hear them for what they are. Micro, extremely small. Aggression, a forceful action or procedure, such as an unprovoked attack, especially when intended to dominate or master.
Monica, thank you. Thank you for your willingness to correct and to share your experience. I recognize the emotional labor that takes, and I thank you for being in relationship. And I also want to commit to doing the work, to practicing, to not always coming to you to ask the questions, but to do my own research and to put in the work that it takes to really become a good ally and a person who wants to eradicate racism and dismantle white supremacy. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Friends, this is important work. And I hope that you will continue to sit with this experience, to ask yourself and maybe each other some questions. And so if you're going to be in the breakout sessions today, I would invite you to use at least the first couple of rounds to really discuss what other negative effects these microaggressions have on people of color, to talk about how we might recognize them and learn and be able to effectively eradicate them from our lives and from our society. And if you're not in the breakout sessions today, I would invite you to sit with those questions for the coming week or maybe month or year, and to commit to doing the work. Thank you. I want to say thank you again to Monica for having that conversation with me, and thank you to you all for listening and for being a community of people who are committed to continuing to doing this work and to learning. Our prelude today, or our interlude, I'm sorry, is Sheep May Safely Graze, performed by Eva Rebold.